Hi, my name is Rene. Sounds like Green. I'm a Minnesota-based probate real estate specialist, and today I'm joined by Bill Gross, a Los Angeles-based probate real estate specialist with over 30 years experience. And Bill, when it comes to dealing with the sale of a probate home where there are multiple heirs involved, this seems to be a really emotional situation, and there seem to be some unique challenges dealing with multiple personalities. Why do you think this is such a hot topic for families that are going through probate?
Well, I'm not surprised in that I come from a family. I have a brother and a sister, the three of us. And while, we get along pretty well, families fight, families argue about things. And so sometimes, what to outsiders looks like fighting is really just how they communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's real dysfunction. And like it'll strike me when people say, well, I haven't talked to my brother in 20 years. Like I couldn't imagine not talking to my brother for a week or two.
Right.
And my brother lives halfway around the world. And yet my sister kind of, in fact, her husband gave me a hard time because I don't talk to her about me once a month. Well, she's much younger. I was never that close to her. Um, so there's these family dynamics. Well, and they're feeling left out of my life. And I'm like, I don't know, I talk to her once a month.
Mm-hmm.
um, so the answer is, I think, we're human beings, and I think relationships are messy and they're personal and they vary and they change over time and they are cumulative. And so you're dealing with human beings. I think you have to be sensitive to that if you're a professional, for sure.
Absolutely. And so, as a real estate agent, have you had any situations where you are working with a personal representative and a sibling or another heir pops up and
Mhm.
either wants to change the plan or challenge challenge your plan?
All the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I had one, a common one is unfortunately too common, where the husband had a child out of wedlock.
Mm-hmm.
This child is his issue. It's his child. And he had said to the child of his wife that this other daughter, he was disowning her.
Mm.
And he treated her that way. She was into drugs and had a horrible life because her father really did abandon her. But when
Mm-hmm.
she died, he never did a will. And by law, the estranged daughter was entitled to half of the estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it drove the other sister crazy because she was the one who was supposed to get everything in her mind. And you could say maybe she was, but the father never wrote a will and he never wrote an
Right.
estate plan. So, the good sister in her mind never went to see the bad sister. Didn't want to be in the house when she was there. And there was just so much drama with every aspect of cleaning out the house and the mail and the mortgage statements. Um, so I would just say that, yeah, I've seen some pretty radical dysfunction, and I also see sometimes they get along real well and they work together. And I always find that inspiring and something I aspire to. I know in my case, my aunt passed, and my sister and I and my brother all worked together and took
Mm-hmm.
care of her estate together.
So in a scenario like the one you just talked about, do you, as a real estate specialist who works in probate, do you help the personal representative navigate that?
Yeah,
Or yeah, okay.
yeah. In this case, the estranged daughter was the one who filed for the probate.
Oh, wow.
And what had I'm trying to remember the exact reason why it was for half the property that she was
Mm-hmm.
entitled to, and they had to sell it. I think the mother had half, and this other daughter had half, and because the daughter predated it was a second wife. So in California law, the daughter is an equal heir, or the
Mm-hmm.
first wife theoretically is equal heir to the second wife, and so but she was on drugs and she was, I guess, a prostitute. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
she just, I don't really know what she was doing, but she was barely surviving life. And I'd help her with very complicated paperwork and documents and signing. Now we have a service we use to help step in her place for her to help make that happen. And so I literally met with her, drove her to Burger King, bought her lunch,
Mm-hmm.
which to her was like the most gracious thing anybody had done for her. I mean, I spent, I don't know, $20 at Burger King. And she was just crying because I was so nice to her to do that. I thought, what else? But that's where she ate. Like that was for her, that was like an upscale meal opportunity. And
Right.
so the answer to the question is, yeah, I think that I pride myself on trying to help people where they are and help them get what's best for them. And I know the other sister looked at me as helping her rival, but the truth
Hmm.
is, this daughter was entitled to it, and she was just otherwise helpless. And frankly, absent me, would probably be taken advantage of by an unscrupulous attorney or real estate agent.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I see some of that as well. I will do as much as I can. I'll do things like try to be transparent with our decisions and our paperwork, or educate the rest of the family on what our plan and approach is and why we're doing it. And that helps not only with the family, but sometimes it helps with the court as well.
Yes.
Um, but sometimes the personal representative is reluctant to make the decision because they're worried it might damage the relationship, or they don't really understand what the legal boundaries are. And in those cases, I do my best to encourage them to talk to their attorney. I know what the attorney, I don't know. I assume I know what the attorney might tell them, but some of these are really difficult situations, and people are legally entitled to their inheritance.
I think that as a real estate agent, we're constantly pushed not to give legal advice, which we're not allowed to give legal advice.
Right.
But we are allowed to give business advice. We are allowed to
Right.
give real estate advice, but we're also allowed to give business advice. And I feel very comfortable saying to people, look, I don't know the legal implications of what you need to disclose to your sister. But I know
Hmm.
in a business sense, the more information you give them, the less upset they'll be over time. The more
Correct.
transparent you are, the more proactive. The thing I was taught was, we'll make the extra phone call, the extra email. You never get penalized for making the extra effort in building a relationship. And that's not legal advice, that's business advice. I try to encourage my customers to always just take that extra step and try to
Hmm.
diffuse the energy that your sibling has because they haven't heard from you.
Absolutely. And sometimes what I'll do for some of my clients is I will record either our review of offers, or I will record our listing, our
Yes.
listing plan. And then I will give them a link so they can share it with the entire family so everybody sees and
Yes.
hears the same thing. And
Yeah.
I've had a couple of families come back to me and tell me that was probably the most helpful thing in their process, was everybody being able to go back, watch the video 3, 4, or 5 times. Did he really say this? Are we really going to do that? And then the personal representative, they don't have to personally deal with that. But
Right.
anything we could do to help, it's a difficult situation.
With technology today, there's no reason not to do Zoom calls with multiple parties and record them and post them and put out all the offers into a shared drive and make a spreadsheet that outlines the highlights.
Yes,
100%. I think technology can really help us communicate more effectively.
absolutely. And sometimes our traditional agents miss that because they don't realize the emotional dynamics that the family might be
Right.
dealing with.
Right.
So that's a big value add, in my opinion, that
Hmm.
you do that for your families. You talked about some of the mistakes that people make. You talked about legal process, or the situation where a sibling or another heir is entitled to something, even if there was an estranged sibling. You mentioned a will. So so a will and trust would be one way to avoid that before the person passes away. Are there any, I don't know that you can really avoid it after the person has passed, but are there any other tips that a family should be aware of that could help them navigate that situation of dealing with an estranged heir, or someone that just pops up?
Well, I always feel like, preparation is always the key. And so I don't know that I have the answer, but thinking ahead, well, what would happen if I passed? What would life look like? And are you happy with that answer? And if not, make appropriate changes. So it might
Hmm.
be deeding properties a certain way, organizing your papers a certain way, appointing somebody ahead of time to say, hey, you're going to be the administrator. Here's all the documents you would need at that point. There's different ways to prepare, I think. And I mean, it can be gruesome to think about, but at the same time, look, I deal with cases all the time where customers just didn't do enough preparation, and as a result, is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in taxes and legal fees because
Hmm.
they do the proper preparation. So again, I think I would just say a little preparation, a little time thinking through, well, what would I want it to look like and then make the changes necessary to make that happen.
Sure, absolutely. And Bill, one of the other questions that comes up a lot in a situation like this is whether it's better to hire an attorney or agree to mediation. Now, personally, most of the families I've worked with, we've never had to go through mediation or there's been an attorney involved. But do you have any thoughts on mediation as an option?
Usually mediation is when there's a conflict. And so the goal would be to avoid it. Once you get to that point, and the way it looks is, sibling one files for probate and sibling two also files to
Mm,
probate the estate. How do you resolve those two? And if they can come to agreement, and sometimes, I find early in the game it's more likely. And
hmm.
as a realtor, I can step in and say, listen, you don't need to argue over the house. If you both agree to sell the house, let me be the special administrator to sell the house. We'll put the money in the bank. Now you can argue over the proceeds of the
Right.
money, but at least we have
Yes.
one quarterback getting the house sold. So again, it just depends on what they're trying to accomplish. But again, preparation and the earlier you deal with things, I think the better and the less costly they are.
Absolutely. That's a really great recommendation. You can work with the court and your attorney to sell the property first and then deal with the money afterwards.
Yes.
That can save people a lot of time and a lot of money
Yes.
by
Yes.
doing that. Bill, this has been really helpful. What other parting thoughts do you have when it comes to dealing with a situation where there are multiple heirs and sometimes contentious?
Well, again, I think at the risk of sounding of harping on the same thing over and over again, you can't plan enough ahead of time. I think we often think we think about things,
Yeah.
but we really don't. We think about thinking about it. We don't actually stop and think about it. And I would say that if you have a situation, you have an estate, whether somebody's passed or is getting ready to pass, spend time and really with a pad of paper, or I use a Google Doc or a whiteboard, and saying, well, what are the possible things? What could go wrong here? And trying to anticipate
Mhm.
those. I just find that a little bit of preparation is invaluable. You can't go back later and prepare. It's too late at that point. You have to deal with the cards you've played. But if you can put a couple good cards in your deck ahead of time, you can come out ahead more often than not.
Excellent. And Bill, I mentioned that you are in the Los Angeles area. You
Mhm,
and I have a network of probate specialists across the country who can
mhm.
help. What is the best way for someone to contact you for more advice?
Well, on social media at Bill Gross Probate. My website's billgrossprobate.com, and my phone number's there, email's there. Set an appointment, come to my Facebook group, Probate Weekly. I have a podcast I do every week called Probate Weekly as well. So go to billgrossprobate.com and you'll find all my contact info.
Excellent. And we will include all of that info in the show notes as well. And Bill, this has been really, really helpful for families who might need assistance or are not sure where to start. And so I really appreciate you just taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to chat with us today.
My pleasure. Well, Reed, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Bill.
Bye bye.